Relations between Beijing and London have also taken a dramatic turn for the worse since the British government promised to strip out the Chinese company Huawei from our 5G network amid an increasing international row over the rights of Democrats in Hong Kong and the repression of the Muslim Uyghur people in North China. Is China changing in a way that makes a close relationship between the West and its communist leadership simply impossible? Liu Xiaoming is the Chinese ambassador in London. Ambassador, welcome. Can I first of all ask you about Hong Kong? Are rights of dissent and freedom of speech still valued in Hong Kong?
Fully respected. I think people talk about this national security law. National security law is about to restore order, to protect the majority, the rights of majority people. It's targeted on a very small group of criminals who intend to endanger the national security.
Let me remind people what the national security law actually says. It says that Beijing now decide what breaks the law, not Hong Kong itself. Protesters can be arrested just for using placards. Police can search buildings without warrants, and trials can be held in secret without a jury. Surely those laws break that one country, two systems promise China originally made.
That is wrong information. I don't know if you have read the national security law yet. First, I would say, the national law begin with the statement that China will continue to implement one country, two systems, and Hong Kong people will administer their affairs with a high degree of autonomy. The reason why this national law was enacted is because in the past 23 years, Hong Kong government, the special administration, is entitled to enact its own law according to basic law to protect the national security. That is called 23 article. But because of opposition, because of these troublemakers, scaremongering, the government failed to implement. But it is a central government responsibility to take care of national security.
You say troublemakers, but Amnesty International, of course, which is an organisation much respected by many people watching this programme, says there was a rapid deterioration in the rights to freedom of peaceful assembly, expression and association as the Hong Kong authorities increasingly adopted mainland China's vague and all-encompassing definition of national security.
This Amnesty International is not respected in China because it's made...
Really?
Hume made numerous false accusations, about China. Never say a nice word. Never be objective about China. That's the problem of them. So, we talk about Hong Kong situation last year. There's turbulence, riots. Any responsible government have to take measures to address the situation, to make...
Why couldn't the existing laws be enough to do that? Because there were quite strong existing laws. If people were really causing trouble, really trying to cause disruption in Hong Kong, they could have been dealt with by existing laws, not importing...
That is exactly the reason why there should be a national security law, because the existing law failed to curtail, to contain this violence, looting, smashing, storming the electrical, just like to storm the British Parliament. So, because there's no law governing national security in Hong Kong for the past 23 years.
Isn't the real problem that you don't want people in Hong Kong to talk about democracy in Hong Kong? President Trump, no less, has said this. He says their freedom has been taken away, their rights have been taken away, no special privileges, and with it goes Hong Kong, he said, because it will no longer be able to compete with free markets. A lot of people will be leaving Hong Kong. They'll be leaving Hong Kong for Australia, for the United States, and for the UK. Will they be free to leave?
Certainly they are free to leave. Hong Kong people enjoying unprecedented freedom after handover for the past 23 years. Before the handover, what kind of freedom do they have? Did they have a freedom to elect their governor? The last governor was appointed by the British government. But for the past 23 years, there's 5 chief executives elected by the Hong Kong people.
surely the fundamental truth is that under your new president, you have a more nationalistic, more assertive regime in Beijing, and the real question is whether that regime can have a completely open relationship with free markets around the world, and Hong Kong is the epicenter for that.
I think you have a very wrong impression about what is going on in China. Let me give you an update. You don't trust our statement. You always regard it as a propaganda. But it seems to me you trust more Americans. You don't regard them as a propaganda.
Reading it
okay. The Harvard School, the Kennedy, Harvard University's Kennedy School of Government just issued a report. They did this report covering last 13 years. They did the polling. The conclusion is the Chinese people's rating of satisfaction for Chinese Communist Party, Chinese government is 93%, much higher than any Western government, Western leadership. So that's the fact about what is going on in China.
We are going to get a response from the British government this coming week over Hong Kong. And there are reports that, for instance, the Magnitsky Act might be used to ban individual Chinese people from British territory, and also that the extradition treaty is going to be torn up. What would be China's reaction if that's the case?
That is totally wrong. We never believe in unilateral sanction. We believe that the UN is the authority, has the authority to, impose a sanction. And if UK government goes that far to impose sanction on any individuals in China, China will certainly make resolute response to it. You've seen what happened between China and the United States. They sanctioned Chinese officials. We sanctioned their senators, their officials. I do not want to see this tit for tat between China and US happened in China-UK relations. I think UK should have its own independent foreign policy rather than to dance to the tune of Americans, like what happened to Huawei.
You've talked about the possibility of tit for tat or reprisals. Let me ask about Huawei, because when the Huawei decision was announced, the Chinese Foreign Ministry said that it would severely undermine mutual trust and come at a cost. Can I ask you what the cost is?
We are still evaluating the consequences. This is a very bad decision. When this decision was announced, I said this is a dark day for Huawei. It's a dark day for China-UK relations. It's even a darker day for United Kingdom because you missed the opportunity to be a leading country. I happen to agree with the Martin Jakes. He is a British scholar, historian.
He knows China well.
He knows China well. He wrote a book when the West when the West ruled the world. He has this good line. He said, in 1793, history has its cycle. 1793, Chinese Emperor Qianlong told the English king that we have a slightest need of your country's manufacturing. So that marked the start of a 150-year decline of China. So 223 years later, in 2020, UK told China, we do not have a slightest need of your 5G technology. So I do not know what will happen for the next 150 years.
Is China, looking at the TikTok decision as well, is China going to punish British companies like, for instance, Jaguar Land Rover operating China as part of the response?
We do not want to politicize economy. That is wrong. So that's wrong for United Kingdom, to discriminate Chinese company because of pressure from United States. People talk about this national security risk. There's no hard, solid evidence to say Huawei is a risk to UK. They've been here for 20 years. They made a huge contribution to not only to telecom industry of this country. They have, implement their corporate responsibility. They help the UK to develop, and UK want to have a, Prime Minister Boris Johnson have an ambitious plan to have a full coverage, 5G coverage by 2025. I think Huawei can deliver that. Huawei can be a big help. But now it seems to me UK just kick them out. Use your media word to purge them under the pressure of the United States. You know, U.S. Leaders claim credit because of this.
OK, let's turn to vaccine development. Now, Britain has accused Russia of trying to steal vaccine secrets. And when I had Rick Scott, an American senator from Florida, very, very close to Donald Trump on this programme, he accused China of much the same thing. He said, we have evidence, that's the United States, that China is trying to sabotage or slow down our ability to get this vaccine done. It came through our intelligence community. What's your response?
Those China batches make countless accusations. I don't think I should spend time with you, you know, to refute their accusation against China. China is very open. And China is working, you know, also with the UK scientists on vaccine. And the President Xi made it very clear at the World Health Assembly that we'll make it a public good when it's ready. And we want to make it accessible, you know, by especially in the poorest country in Africa.
Let's turn to the single biggest problem probably at the moment between China and the West, which is the treatment of the Uyghur people in North China. Let's look at some very disturbing drone footage that's been widely shared around the world. This is almost certainly over northern China, over Xinjiang. Can you tell us what is happening here?
I cannot see you know, this video. This is not the first time you show me. I still remember last year you showed me what is happening in Xinjiang.
In Xinjiang, exactly.
But let me tell you this. Xinjiang, have you been to Xinjiang yourself?
No, I never have.
You know, Xinjiang is regarded as the most beautiful place in Xinjiang. There's a Chinese saying, you do not know how big China is.
Ambassador, that is not beautiful coverage, however, is it?
You know, Xinjiang, that is exactly what I'm going to tell you. Since 1990, Xinjiang has completely changed because there's thousands of terrorist attacks. People cannot...
That was 10 years ago. Can I ask you why people are kneeling, blindfolded and shaven and being led to trains in modern China? Why? What is going on there?
I do not know where you get this videotape. You know, sometimes you have a transfer of prisons and prisoners, you know, in any country.
But just what is happening here, Ambassador?
I do not know. Where did you get these video clips?
These have been going around the world. They've been authenticated by Western intelligence agencies and by Australian experts who say these are Uyghur people being pushed onto trains and taken off.
Let me tell you this. The so-called Western intelligence keeping up make this a false accusation against China. They said 1 million more Uyghur has been persecuted. You know how many population Xinjiang has? It's just about 40 years ago. It's 4-5 million. Now it's 11 million people. And people say, you know, we impose, we have ethnic cleansing, but the population has doubled in the 40 years.
I'm so sorry to interrupt, but according to your own local government statistics, the population growth in Uyghur jurisdictions in that area has fallen by 84% between 2015 and 2018. 84%.
That's not right. I gave you an official figure. You ask me, I gave you this figure as a Chinese ambassador. This is a very authoritative figure. In the past 40 years, the Uyghur population increased, the population in Xinjiang increased to double. The population doubled. So there's no so-called restriction of the population. There's no so-called forced abortion and so on.
But there is a program of forced sterilization being imposed on Uyghur women at the moment, and it's gone on for a long time, and people are finally coming out of China and talking about it. And I've got the witness statement from a woman who was on Newsnight, a brave woman who talked about it openly, which we can now watch. Here is somebody who went through the forcible sterilization program in China.
I can easily repute this accusation. You know, those people...
This was a woman who...
These people, you know, there's some small group of anti-Chinese China elements working against the interests of China. But the majority of Xinjiang people are happy with what is going on in Xinjiang. In the past 3 years, There's no single terrorist attacks in Xinjiang. People can enjoy harmonious life. Uyghur people enjoy harmonious life, peaceful, harmonious coexistence with other ethnic groups of people. Uyghur people is just one small portion of the Chinese population, even among the Muslims, but majority of them living happily and peacefully, harmoniously with other ethnic groups. The success of China is we have a very successful ethnic policy. We treat every ethnic group as an equal.
Okay. Well, let's listen to an individual named Uyghur woman, Zumra Jawat, who said this recently.
Oylama anda olsa yana ögünüş degan narsani sen hozir chiqqaning bilan yana ikkinchi qatim kirmayman deb ayar bir a qildi, meyer bir a qildi. Bir yer ag'ritibdi-da bularning deb o'yildim. Birdan turib mening o'z ko'zimni echib bir yarim soatdan keyin menga ag'rib kirishga boshladi qo'zqimga. Shuning bilan men mashlar o'xshashlar o'rashga boshladim u yerda. U shundan mujuvati o'qo'saq degan shunchalik darajada ag'rib.
Right.
First of all, there's no so-called, pervasive, massive forced sterilization among Uyghur people in China. It's totally against the truth. Secondly, the government government policy strongly opposed to this kind of practice. But I cannot rule out, single cases for any country. There's, single cases. A single
so you can't
case.
rule out the fact it's happening at all. There is a general view.
But the general policy is that is not a government policy. General view is we treat every ethnic group in China as equal.
When we see interviews like that, and we see people blindfolded and led off to trains to be taken to re-education camps, it reminds people in the West what was going on in Germany in the 1930s and 1940s.
That's totally wrong. There's no such a concentration camp in Xinjiang. I think we discussed it. With regard to that video clip, I'll get back to you. There's a lot.
Okay.
There's a lot of fake. We are in a modern, we are in the information age.
Sorry.
Media,
okay.
they make
let me
all
remind
kinds
you,
of
Ambassador,
fake accusations against China.
I hear that, but let me remind you of what the UN Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of Genocide says. It says that genocide is killing people, of course, causing serious bodily or mental harm, deliberately inflicting conditions of life calculated to bring about a group's physical destruction, imposing measures intended to prevent births, and forcibly transferring children to another group. All of those things, it is alleged, have been happening in China, and China is going to face accusations at the United Nations about this.
This is not true. This is not true. The facts just show the opposite. People in Xinjiang enjoy happy life. They enjoy, the people call for good order to restored in Xinjiang. China, of course, is strongly opposed to any torture, any persecution, and discrimination of any ethnic group people. This is not the case in China. The policy of the Chinese government, as I said, every ethnic group in China is treated equal. That's the success story of a Chinese national policy.
You've said in the past, give us the names. When we were talking about this last time, about Uyghur children, you said, give us the names of these children who've been separated from their families, and we will investigate. The BBC did provide the Chinese embassy with names, and we haven't heard back.
I never received any names since our last show. I hope that you can give me the names. We certainly will get back to you. As a matter of fact, we have an office in Xinjiang handling this kind of. They respond to us very quickly. Each time we made inquiry, they will get back to us. So that's good. I like this kind of conversation. If you have a solid base, solid evidence about any complaint, you just give me the names. We'll get back to you.
Is it any longer possible for the West to deal with a country which is so nationalistic and so much under the thumb of the Communist Party leadership?
I do not agree with your, description of China. It's not China become so aggressive. People say China becoming very aggressive. That's totally wrong. China has not changed. Its Western countries, headed by United States, they started this so-called new Cold War on China. They have this sanction, they have this smearing, name-calling. Take what happened with this coronavirus. They still keep calling China virus, Wuhan virus. Totally wrong. But we have to make a response. We do not provoke. But once we were provoked, we have to make response.
Ambassador, thanks very much indeed for coming in to talk to us today. Much appreciated. This week,
China denies an accusation by Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab that they are carrying out human rights abuses against the Uyghur population.
Can I ask you why people are kneeling, blindfolded and shaven and being led to trains in modern China? Why? What is going on there?
I do not know where you get this videotape.
It is deeply, deeply troubling, and the reports and the human aspect of it, from forced sterilisation to the education camps, are reminiscent of something we have not seen for a long, long time.
China has threatened repercussions over British criticism of its handling of Hong Kong. The Foreign Secretary, Dominic Raab, will set out in full tomorrow Number 10's response to Beijing's tough new security law for the territory, amid calls from some senior Conservatives to suspend Britain's extradition treaty with China. There's also criticism of the treatment of the Muslim Uyghur population in the province of Xinjiang, amid claims that some women are being forcibly sterilised. Our diplomatic correspondent Caroline Hawley has more.
It's never been an easy relationship, but now troubles are mounting on multiple fronts. There's deep concern for the future of Hong Kong after China imposed new security laws on the former British colony, undermining its autonomy. The government is now preparing to escalate its response.
I said we would conduct a review of our extradition arrangements and also a range of other measures that we might wish to take. I've now, with the Home Secretary and the rest of government, concluded that review. I will update the House of Commons on what further measures we're taking tomorrow.
Today, China warned Britain not to follow the US in imposing sanctions.
If UK government goes that far to impose sanctions on any individuals in China, China will certainly make resolute response to it.
China reacted with fury to Britain's decision to ban Huawei's technology because of security concerns. There are fears now of the potential economic fallout for British business. Other countries, including the US, Japan and Australia, have paid a price for falling out with China.
China has sanctioned commerce, trade, the companies of those countries operating in China. So, to be honest, I mean, it's difficult to predict what China might do with regard to the United Kingdom, but we might have to expect that British companies would be in the crosshairs.
What China is doing to its Uyghur minority has caused international outrage. Men have been forced into mass re-education camps, women forcibly sterilised. Dominic Raab today said the human rights abuses being committed were egregious and deeply, deeply troubling. The ambassador was shown video that appears to show bound, blindfolded men being forced onto a train. This was his response.
Uyghur people enjoy harmonious life, peaceful, harmonious coexistence with other ethnic groups of people. You know, Uyghur people is just one small portion of the Chinese population, even among the Muslims, but majority of them living happily and peacefully, harmoniously.
The British government says it can't stand by and watch abuses take place, but it also wants a good relationship with China and with the US at the same time. An almost impossible balancing act. Caroline Hawley, BBC News.
Well, Ting Zhang is the founder and CEO of Crayfish.io. That's a business service platform working with UK-China collaboration, trade and investment. She told me that rising political tensions were already having an impact on business relations.
Yes, indeed. As someone who has been working passionately for the last 20 years to facilitate UK-China trade and investment, I'm deeply upset by this rapid decline in the UK-China relationship in the last week.
How else, though, does a country make its position clear about its anger and displeasure about what is happening to one of its former territories, and indeed on a human rights level, with the overwhelming evidence that seems to be emerging of what China is doing and Beijing is doing with its Uyghur population in Xinjiang?
Well, I think there are undoubtedly, as we can see, different political system, legal system, and such challenges have been there between UK and China. But we're talking about business and we're talking about trade interest, and we shouldn't let those interfere with what's otherwise growing trade interest between UK and China.
But some would actually really be quite startled at that comment by you. I mean, business, you think business should be allowed to run smoothly, whatever the human rights record of a country?
I'm not saying that. I work with British businesses every day, as well as Chinese business and investors. What I can see is they are working together to form a partnership. That's adding to the economic interest to both countries. The differences can be sorted through other constructive dialogues, but not between the businesses, which is what I am involved with.
Okay, and how concerned are the business people based in China that you are speaking to about this deterioration of relations?
I think there's a lot of uncertainties. There's definitely negative feelings, and there's feelings being misunderstood or heard, just like on the UK side, there's also negative feelings. But if we are able to repair this relationship in the coming months, I think that concern can go away.
How much concern is there with your British business here about the theft of property rights, of patents, and other issues like that, for which China stands accused?
Well, I think China has only been doing business with the West in the current days for a few decades, and there's a lot of legal systems are being improved. And this year, China actually started the new foreign investment law, which gives a lot of new advantage over foreign businesses, so that they can actually help protect them better to do business with China. So I think we should see the trend is improving. There are problems still in IP protection is one, but there are cultural misunderstanding. There are different ways to do business. That's why there are people like us, but also governments trying to help smoothen that, trying to make this work.
So the West can trust China, can it, when it comes to doing business with China?
I think the trust has to be built, and it has been built. And yes, I think the trust is something that has to be constantly worked at by both parties. And just like China needs to trust the West, and the West needs to trust China. And it's not just between the governments. There's businesses, there's individuals, and trust has to be at all levels.
Tin Zhang speaking to me a little earlier.